Welcome to Self-Helpful. I'm your guide, Kevin Miller, and I curate the sea of new personal development messages to bring the most influential leaders onto this show. Join me as I question my guests to better understand their counsel so we can all integrate the wisdom into our lives, because we all want to elevate our own experience and improve the way we show up for others. The Self-Helpful podcast is presented by Ziglar, your premier source for equipping coaches. Visit Ziglar.com. Hi, Self-Helpful listeners. In this episode, find peace by first creating boundaries within yourself. This is part 3 in my series on boundaries, instigated by psychotherapist Terri Cole, and the message in her new book, Boundary Boss, the essential guide to talk true, be seen, and finally live 3. In this episode, my chosen co-host is Broadway and screen star and my frequent co-host, Renée Marino. Renée is author of Becoming a Master Communicator, and she's one of my favorite connoisseurs and practitioners of personal development. Renée listened to my conversation with Terri Cole, and at the top of the show here, she says, I always thought of boundaries as my boundaries to create for another person, right? Like, so here are my boundaries in my exterior relationship for you. But it's so much about the boundaries we create within ourselves. That's what she came to after listening to the show with Terri. And this is what steered the conversation here to a new paradigm that is just helping me tremendously. Remember, you can watch this full episode if you like on YouTube. Just search for Self-Helpful with Kevin Miller. Renée, I wanted to talk to you about this because I just have an inkling that we will resonate on what we do on so much that we will on boundaries and how that's played out for us. But so you listened to the show with Terri, and I'm so curious on like what hit you.
Oh, so much. I took so many notes on this interview. First and foremost, she is so peaceful. Did you feel that speaking with her? Like, I felt that watching you guys, like just her energy was so calming. And I was like, oh yeah, this is nice.
She was calming, and it felt contemplative to me. And she was, I love having conversations with people who take the question or thought and chew on them and really, really think through. So yeah, she, no wonder that she has so many people following her.
Yes, 100%. So that was my first observation. My second observation was, when I think of boundaries, I think before listening to this interview, I always thought of boundaries as my boundaries to create for another person, right? Like, okay. So here are my boundaries in my exterior relationships for you. But it's so much about the boundaries we create within ourselves, because if you are an over-functioning codependent, or you are someone who is always giving that advice when it's not warranted, it's really about reflecting it back on yourself and saying, oh, no, I need to first create that boundary with myself to say, Renée, maybe that person doesn't need your advice. And as Terri talks about, it's just asking great questions. And I was just like, so like, once again, the reaffirming and the validation that it always starts within us first.
It's interesting. I moments ago just got off doing a show with Vienna Farron, who we had talked about her, had her come on and talk about Britt Frank, and so we just did. And one of the things that came out of it in talking about anxiety and awareness was the connection to self. And she actually brought it up. I was sharing something about me, and she said, yeah, that's like a disconnect. You disconnected to yourself. I said, yeah, I do that. Just like I don't tend to often affirm other people. It's not a natural thing. I don't affirm myself. And, I look at it and I'm feeling this. I'm thinking, Kevin, you shouldn't be feeling that. Just get out of that. You stepped in some feelings. Get out of that stuff quick. And connecting with self. And I hear, with that, with boundaries, I think I did too, that I looked at boundaries as this box you kind of create around yourself, or these barriers, and tell people, no, don't step over that, or whatever.
Yeah.
It would feel so bad, as opposed to what you're talking about, that no, what are I don't know, what would you say? The safe zone for me, that I know that this is my internal, I don't know. I hadn't thought about it that way. Safety zone. I don't know. How's that fit?
Safety zone. It's just that internal awareness, that internal compass to be like, oh yeah, I want to give that advice. I want to share, but no, it's not the time. Instead, sit back, and I'm going to start using this, but like, take some of that Terri Cole energy, that beautiful, like, sit back energy, and allow the person to be heard. And then just ask those great questions. So you allow them to have their own journey. And when she was talking about her sister, I thought that was I was almost getting like a little, I could feel myself getting a little anxious when she started talking about not, quote unquote, not saying not helping her, but not rushing in to give her advice, even though her sister was going through so much, like, because I am that person. I always want to help. I want to make sure I'm there 500%. So when Terri talked about, she started feeling that shift where, no, that's not my job, right? I don't know. Her therapist told her, what makes you think that you know what is meant for your sister on her journey? And I was like, oh my gosh, but it's so uncomfortable when you are someone who's used to looking at yourself as the go-to person, right? Or that sometimes I call it like being the glue of your family. When you look at yourself as the glue that keeps things together, that keeps people together, it's uncomfortable then to sit back and not want to help in that way.
Totally. Well, like I talked about with her, I realized, I'm constantly realizing that's my identity. And and it's uncomfortable for me not to, and the word that I kept coming back to is be responsible, take responsibility for things that should not be my responsibility. They're not my responsibility. It shouldn't be. And it can't, and if it has to do with somebody else's feelings and behavior, it literally can't be. And yet, like you talked about, I'm so often, you and I have talked about, the empathic thing, and I'm uncomfortable. I want to fix that or fix you or take care of that thing for me because I'm uncomfortable. And so I'm with you on we'll have to get a t-shirt like the TC energy, Terri Cole energy. Take a deep breath. It's not my responsibility. And there should be peace in that, because the other side is not peace, but I'm still addressing my own comfort, I guess. Yeah.
But I would want to ask her this, because that's such a good point. And that is, I think, the biggest struggle with empaths, with highly sensitive people like you and I are, is you feel everything on another level. So things that most people are not aware of, i.e. the person next to you is really uncomfortable, you're feeling that with them. So there is a part of this whole, boundary talk where, in a way, by helping them, it feels like you are creating your own boundaries, because you're like, I need to protect myself, because if they're uncomfortable, I'm feeling super uncomfortable. And I do want to take care of myself to not feel uncomfortable. So I'm going to do what I can to help them out of their struggle. Right. So it's weird. It's like you can look at it both ways, because we do feel things on a grander scale.
It's interesting. You know what it made me think of, Renee? So you and I were together a month ago or whatever it was at the event speaking. And I've been to some big events, some big stages. This was a little smaller and more intimate. And I found myself so uncomfortable for other speakers, like where they would do something and I'm looking at the crowd and I'm taking this all on. And I just got to, again, I didn't have the Terri Cole energy thought, and I've just got to take a deep breath or just go leave, because it's bothering me. And it has it's, I'm just a spectator out in the crowd. It has no relation to me. And yet I am taking that on. Of course, how does that play out in the rest of my life with my wife and my kids and I'm taking responsibility, and it's just a convoluted mess.
Yes.
So and you've talked about this on before, was that, I mean, how has it played out in your life? I mean, I kind of wanted to know, we haven't talked about this specifically, what your own boundary journey has been. Like, what did you have to come out of? And assuming you're still on the journey as well. Tell me what it looks like.
Yeah. These past few years, probably like the past 3 years, I've been hit with it hard, this unlearning. I'm in this phase, and I think we all are, right? That's part of having the human existence. We're unlearning those things that got embedded in us in our childhood. And I'm unlearning this belief that I have to be the savior of my family. Like, I remember at 5 years old, where did I get that thought from? Renee, you're going to be the savior of your family. And my family didn't need saving. They're great. They're wonderful. I grew up in a loving, tight-knit family. So it's interesting, like, where did that come from, that I put this on myself? And then I moved throughout my life, very high achiever, perfectionist, very type A. And it's a double-edged sword, because so many of those characteristics are what helped me to get to, great heights in my career as a performer, as a professional actress, now as a speaker. But it doesn't feel good anymore. So these past 3 years have been all about that awareness of, like, oh, there it goes again. I think I have to take care of everyone. And when my mom's upset, I'm also getting upset. When my husband's upset, I'm getting upset. When my nieces and nephew are uncomfortable, I'm uncomfortable. And I'm like, whoa, this is too much for one human being. And quite honestly, I started feeling it physically, like in my physical health and my mental health. Because I was just like, this is way too much for one human being. So I am like in the thick of it right now, Kevin. And that's why this interview came at such a perfect time, because I'm in that space of having to consciously take a step back and let people be who they are, let them be in their situations and just be there when they need me, as opposed to jumping right on in and taking the forefront and being like, okay, I'm going to take care of this all. It's like, no, Renee, you have to take a step back.
It's interesting you talking about your childhood and why asking the question, why did you engage with that perspective of taking care of everybody? So recently we had Jordan Grummett on the show. He's a doctor. His dad was a doctor, and he's 9 or 11, I can't remember. And his dad dies. I think it was cancer or something like that. And little kid Jordan, he has no reasoning for that, but his dad died. And the story that somehow he put in his own head was that it was his fault. And so to address that, he needed to become a doctor and save people. So he did. And he goes to school and becomes a doctor, and then, literally becomes a doctor and realizes, well, this sucks. He didn't like it, didn't fit, whatever. Of course, and there's a story past that, but you go back and go, how on earth did you get that feeling? And what came out with Terri, because it had been told to me by a therapist a while ago, and the therapist said, it's really arrogant, Kevin, that you think that you sit there and should take responsibility and can, like, what's best for everyone. And that didn't feel good, but it honestly it resonated. I mean, if I look at it as a third party, I go, yeah, that's pretty arrogant to think that I know. That's another journey down there, but of feeling like, oh, I know best and that I'm supposed to. And so I'm practicing it now. I hear that need or hear that opportunity to take, responsibility for something. And I'm better at being aware and just Terri Cole energy. I just got to keep using that. Yes. And stopping. It still doesn't feel good.
It doesn't.
I'm not there yet.
Kev, I'm with you. And I was just thinking that as you were sharing that, it's tricky because in the unlearning, it's so freaking uncomfortable. Like, where you're like, oh my goodness, am I better off just going along with the old pattern I had, or do I stay in this? Of course, my higher self and my advice to everyone listening is no, keep going through it, baby. There's light at the end of the tunnel. We have to go through the messiness. But while you're in it, it can be really uncomfortable. And then sometimes I know for myself, I question, I'm like, so wait, am I causing more harm than good? Because this feels really uncomfortable. But I try to keep reminding myself, no, this is change, right? It's the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. The caterpillar thought its life was over until it became the butterfly. So I try to remind myself of that. And I think with boundaries like this, that's so important to hold on to, because you have those moments where you're just like, so why did I start along this journey again?
Mm-hmm.
What was my reason for doing this?
Yeah. And as you say that, I'm thinking, I mean, there are some times when you hear the need and it almost, I think what I'm still struggling with some is it almost feels negligent. Like if I know how that, like I would take a kid, for instance, and I know how it's going to work out, and it's not going to work out. It's going to, and it feels, I still struggle with that. It feels negligent. And I have to, as you said, I have to put myself in that shoe of no, that's how they are going to learn. And I see that it still though feels bad. And I guess it's not a perfect thing. I mean, we still have to have discernment in the moment and go, okay, am I going to let them, you're not going to let a toddler fall off the roof. I mean, there are some aspects where, okay, we're supposed to say them, but, man, it's a different identity. I just still come back to that. It's still a different identity.
Oh, Kevin, that's such a perfect way to say it. It feels like negligence. It feels like, and again, that's the belief I grew up with. I saw my mom be this way. I saw my grandmother, my father be this way. It's for me, it's that simple. If I see a need and I can help, I'm going to help. Like that's just as simple as it is. But as I've grown, and my mother and I are so close and we're best friends, and we talk a lot about her parenting style. And my dad's, as I said, they were, the most loving parents. They were there for us for everything. But again, there's that trickiness because sometimes, and when my mom listens to this, she'll agree because we've just talked about this, sometimes too much to the point that we didn't handle things on our own because if something was wrong, dad was there to fix it, right? Or mom was there to fix it. And for myself, when I recognized that, and that's why I wanted to go away to college. If there was a chance for me to learn something myself, I did, because I guess the higher part of me recognized like, no, I need to figure these things out on my own. But my parents were the type of parents who didn't, like, if we fell, they took us right to the doctor. They wouldn't be like, wrap it up. Sorry, honey, put some alcohol on that and we're going to keep moving forward. That wasn't their parenting style. So I recognize I've now taken that forward in my life. And the minute something, goes wrong with my dog, my husband, and I'm like, okay, what do we need to do? That's my go-to. So it does take a strong awareness to kick back, give it some Terri Cole energy and be like, all right, maybe they can figure it out themselves. And maybe it's better if they do.
I do. I will tell her that TC energy. I'll tell her we coined that and get a t-shirt. Yeah. Okay. You took me with that to a different place of, we look at boundaries as, okay, these are these, even I got to come up with better vernacular. Cause as I say, these walls or barriers, that sounds so bad, but these are some areas that I'm constructing and it's not, and saying it's not okay for someone to cross that. You brought that though, because that sounds like a negative, to a place of, let's see, how do I turn it around? Of like giving. Like somebody may try to give me something that I'll go, gosh, thank you so much. But no, I do need to figure that out. I had a daughter. I was just with her yesterday and she did this to me a couple times. And she said, Daddy, don't do it for me. I'm going to tell you about this because she'll see the wheels start turning. She's telling me about something. I'm just telling you, don't do it because I need to learn. You're so sweet. And I haven't thought about that for myself. Where are there places where people are doing things for me, taking responsibility that I need to help them with a boundary? So it's not, help them with you don't need to be responsible for that. That'd be a good one with, the intimate relationships sometimes of saying, gosh, thank you so much. But realizing I hadn't thought about that till you brought it up. Are there any areas, and this is something I guess we could all think about, are there areas where other people are taking responsibility for us that they shouldn't be, don't need to be? It's not helping us. We're not growing. And it's probably I was going to say harming them. It's probably not good for them either. They're stressing and taking responsibility for something that they shouldn't, and maybe they can't even. Okay, I haven't thought about that. I haven't made that list yet.
Kevin, do you ever find yourself, or have you, before listening to Terri Cole, in the past being the person you are, who's like the helper, the glue, right? The one who's taking responsibility, helping everybody to the best you can? Did you ever have a situation where you looked at other people, I'm being real transparent here, almost from a place of judgment, the people who don't do that, and they never think that they have to take responsibility for others, and they are the opposite of an overgiver, or how does Terri say it, but like giving advice that's not warranted. I've had many people, especially when I was performing, and I'd be in the dressing room with tons, 8 girls, and we're all different personality styles. And it would be so interesting to me to observe people who weren't like that, because I think I've worn it as a badge of honor, if I'm being quite honest. Like, oh, I'm the go-to person. You're not offering advice to someone? How rude. This person is in need of help. Why aren't you helping them, giving them advice? So now that I realize it, I'm like, oh wow, look at me being judgy Judgerson, thinking that I'm on a pedestal because that's natural for me, when really this just may be part of an over-functioning codependent personality, or, someone who just struggles with her own boundaries.
I don't know how to answer that. I don't have it. I don't know, because part of it, I do want to honor that, even like personality styles. You and I have, talked about that so much. I just took your, what did I just take? What's the new one?
Human design.
Yes. Human design. And to some aspect, to go, gosh, being a helper or something like that we're not saying it's all bad. Yeah. And that's where I struggle with that, of sometimes feeling, and well, honestly, I think I've fallen sometimes on the other side of just going, okay, I'm just going to back off, and I don't help. Like, I don't step up, and I think I can go too far that way as well. So it comes to that moment by moment, discernment. You had me thinking, I was just at a coffee shop a few hours ago, a bunch of people standing around, and this one lady is picking up her, some food and she has one coffee step, on another one. And I'm thinking, and nobody's doing this. So I go over and help her get out the door. And I think that's not wrong. That was nice. That was a great place to be aware and step in. But when we take it too far, or it becomes, especially with those who are closest with us, that we live with and whatnot. Because of course I'm thinking about my wife and my kids and the things that we do day in and day out, that's where it comes in. Because I feel like, you and I are the people who would see somebody who needs the door open for them or needs help with something and help. And it feels good for us. It feels good for them. I think that's pretty good. Yes. I'm thinking more the day to day, I guess.
No, that's great. And I think that's a really important point to kind of nail down on, is that, yes, this is not good or bad. I feel like we all kind of flow in and out of these, if you want to call it, personality styles. So yes, I don't want to put a label that this is bad and, being a giver is bad, by no means. I think that in any personality style, we can take it to the end of the spectrum, or we can stay balanced, right? We can go out of bounds no matter which way it is. So I think, to what you and Terri talked about, it's really about having that awareness to just say, okay, this is who I am. Terri talked about it, and I love she said that. She said, you're going to be who you are at your core. You're an extrovert. You're outgoing. You're a highly sensitive person. That's who you are. Yeah. This isn't about changing who you are. It's just about taking that power of the pause, having that inner awareness to say, okay, in this situation, how can I best use my qualities to help that person to create boundaries while I'm creating my own boundaries?
Okay, well, let me you brought something up, and I was looking through my notes. She said, or she asked the question, am I giving from a place of love or a place of fear
and need?
Yeah. And I'm trying to think about that, because I have had, that's part of my story, is it's been a few years back that I had my first experience with realizing that I remember where I was. I was at my house. I was going across the driveway. It must have been a car thing, probably for one of the kids or somebody. And I realized I was bitter. I was out there bitter. And I think though, if you had asked me though, I would say at face value, no, I'm doing it out of care and love. But obviously that's not the feeling that was inside me. I think that's hard. I think that's hard because I think there's a lot of people out there. You think of the consummate person, the mom or whatever, who takes care of everything and fixes it. And she would say she's doing it out of love, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like she's a martyr. She's pissed at everybody, and you see, or she's exhausted or whatnot. And I think I almost want a different word than love. Is it? I don't know how I'm bumbling around. Like I was gonna say, does it fill me up? But that's not all. It can't be just everything that fills you up. I mean, sometimes you're going to do something that is sacrificial and it needs to be done. But
it's the word is on the tip of my tongue. But this is something I talk about a lot, and that's the how of how you're doing things. Right? It's like if you have
the spirit, you mean, of it?
Exactly. The energy behind it, right? Okay. There's a huge difference. If Kevin, I invite you over, you and your wife for dinner. Kevin, yeah, oh my goodness. I want you and your wife to come over for dinner, come over tomorrow night. And I'm excited and you guys are here and I'm hosting and we're having a great time. Or I invite you and your wife over because you happen to be in New Jersey. So I feel obligation.
Obligated. Yes.
That's the word. If I feel obligated, well, you're in New Jersey. I have to have you over for dinner, even though I know I have to wake up really early the next morning. And I'm like, yeah, Kevin, you and your wife come over. And the whole time I'm like, putting the food out. And I just have this bit of angry, high energy that feels really flustered. That's totally different. That's doing it from a place of feeling obligated as opposed to being like, no, I just want my friends to come over. I want to have a great night of us hanging out. That's two different energies. And I think that's why that question that she has us ask ourselves, am I giving from a place of love or a place of need and fear? Whew, I get chills just saying that, because I know I've said this same thing, maybe not in those exact words, to my mother, to my own mother, because my mother, beautiful soul, would give you the shirt off her back. But a lot of times she does do things from a place of feeling obligated. Mm-hmm. And then the energy behind it, like I've said, Mom, you're better off not making that dinner. Let's go out to eat, because you're not doing it from a place of joy. And I'm not feeling joy now because you're not joyful.
Okay. I love the word. And I'm sitting here thinking about like my own checklist. So if I feel obligated, if I feel I should, if it's a should that's in there, and then back to what you said, something you said earlier, I'm thinking, and I just wrote it down as you were talking, that, or am I doing it because I don't trust you? I don't trust you to do it well or do it right or do it for yourself. Oh. I think that comes up some too, which can kind of hit into that arrogant side, but especially, sometimes you do know something. You see somebody doing it, go, it's not going to work out well. You know that. But if I'm doing it because I don't trust them to, then I'm enabling. They're never going to learn how to do that, even if, and I've fallen on the side of just doing stuff. And I don't even, maybe a middle ground sometimes is saying, hey, and we're back to the advice that you talked about. I guess that's another aspect of it, to where do we feel like that is best to speak up? It's all in the context of the moment. It's hard, but those are some good lines. Coming back to you saying, do I feel obligated? Do I feel like I should? Do I feel like it's an expectation? That's probably another word to put down, expectation, or I'm doing it because I don't trust. Those are tangible. I can grasp onto those. That's so good. And that reminds me of something else you guys talked about. And that was when Terri said, asking the other person, instead of being the over advice giver, instead saying, how can I best serve you in this moment? That has been a game changer between my husband and I. Because my husband is that stereotypical caretaker, alpha male, always just wants to take care of me, take care of his people. That's one of the things I love about him most.
But recently I've been using that where if I'm going through a tough day and he right away jumps in with advice, I'll just say, I've communicated to him, listen, it would be really helpful if sometimes you just let me vent. Mm-hmm. So like the last time I was feeling emotional and I'm having some day of tears, he said, okay, would you like me right now to just let you vent? Or are you looking for advice? And I said, no, I just need to vent. And it felt so peaceful because now, again, the empath in me, the highly sensitive person, I didn't feel a sense from him that he was like waiting for me to stop so he could solve my problem. Now I felt the energy of just like, okay, I'm listening. Mm-hmm. Let the tears flow. Say what you have to say. And it was such a game changer. So I think that was a really, really powerful question that she shared in the interview. Like, how can I best serve you in this moment? Because that's, I think, where we go wrong in a lot of our relationships. I've done it. Again, being the advice giver, sometimes the friend that people come to for advice. Sometimes I find myself over communicating, right? Communication's my thing. So I'm like, okay, great. I have all these ideas and you could try this and how about this? And there have been moments where I've gotten it wrong where it's like, Renee, please stop. I just need to get this out. And I'm like, oh, okay. All right.
I hear you. It's painful. I mean, the honest truth is it's painful to hear something without chiming in, especially when sometimes that it could help, but I'm Terri Cole energy. Terri Cole. Come back to that. I appreciate you bringing that back up. Yeah, I remember her saying that. How can I best serve you in the moment? Because I'm playing with that right now. So I'll be candid. If my wife says anything like, oh my God, we're playing a game. This happened not long ago. We're playing a game and she goes, oh my goodness, I'm just dry mouth. I'm thirsty, but she doesn't do anything. And my go-to is I've done this. This is me. This is what I get up and go get her water. And I think that's sweet. It feels, you said the word, I can't remember. Did you say valiant or so? You used some word a little bit ago.
Savior.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, you feel like that's good and it's nice to serve. I wouldn't say that in and of itself is bad, but that gets to be a habit. And then what I realize is there's times when then she'll say something like that and I'm bitter. I'm like, and I don't do anything, but it would be good to say, how can I best serve you? Or like, would you like me to get you a glass of water? And she may say, oh, it'd be totally sweet. Yeah. Would you? Or she could, no, not at all. I don't care enough to get up and get it. And so if I did, I'd get it myself. Don't trouble yourself. Either way, it's interacting, but I find myself waffling on just the old habit of I just go do it, take responsibility for something and I do this with the kids. I tend to do that. It also trains her to never really ask specifically. I don't think that is necessarily who she was, but that's the habit that I started because I'm just looking for a need to go fill my identity. And I still am wrapped up in that. And as I look at I kind of think of the busybody who's always taking care of, always fixing, always whatever that'd be another one. I think I would need to put that. Am I doing it out of a place of love or a place of fear? Or, well, I guess that'd be the need. I need to do that so that I feel worthy, that I'm filling my little cup of self-worth out of that, because without that, I don't know. And that's been part of my struggle, Renee, is when I take off the Superman cape, it's almost like I'm sitting back there. I don't know what the heck to do. There's lots of needs out there. I don't know, and now I got to be aware of myself, which maybe that's the point that it's easier to go do than to be aware of me.
I was just going to say that. I really believe, I know for myself, it's easier to take action than to sit with yourself. It's easier to do than to be. And you talked about in the interview, we're in a culture of doing, not being. And I say this, I might have said this to you when we were in Dallas. You tell me to do anything. Renee, I need you to do this. Renee, I need you to improve this. Renee, work on this. I'm there. I'm like, yeah, baby, 500% I'm there. You tell me, Renee, let go, surrender. I'm like, cool. But how do I do that? Mm-hmm. Great. How do I do it? I think.
How do I do being? Yeah.
How do I do being? And I think that's been my biggest challenge for years now. I mean, I've been on my own spiritual journey for years and years. And that's one of my biggest, like, the Achilles heel. It's like, okay, I get it. I know, let go, let God, right? I love that phrase and I believe it. And God, I've had moments of surrender. I believe I had to have, right? Because I absolutely have. But when I'm being conscious of it and you're like, okay, Renee, all you have to do in this situation is let go, let God be. I'm like, all right. So what are the rules of that? So I'm just going to follow the rules.
Are there 5 steps for that?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So you, in what you're saying there, it reminds me of, so this was brought to me by a therapist a year and a half ago or so. And it was on the concept of narcissism, which, I'm on the, I guess we're all on the spectrum, but I align well with narcissism, with that, from a behavioral standpoint and a thought process. I do. And what this therapist brought to me, though, she says a lot of narcissists are acutely there. A lack of boundaries is a big part of it. And I realized that it really resonated with me. Not that I knew what to do with it necessarily, but it did. And it also highlighted, and what came out of it too was how out of touch with my emotions I am. And I think not that this is a point about narcissism, but I think if you look at people who you feel are in that spot of narcissism, that they're not in touch with their feelings, because back to what you said on the being, to know boundaries, to comprehend what boundaries I even should have, I have to know how I feel. And if you're not well versed in that, you're kind of out of luck, which is why the therapist also recommended Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart and understanding more of the 87 emotions that Brene brings out in that book, that without those, it was almost a starting point. Okay, if you're going to have boundaries, you got to first come back here and understand what the heck you feel. And a lot of people, especially I think men, know that I don't know, I'm angry. That's it. I'm angry a lot. Well, okay, there's probably some boundaries there, but what are you feeling? And I had to go, then I got to bitter. Okay, I'm bitter. I get that one. And then what's, past that and to start digging down in. And it does call us back to what you said, to being, to self-awareness. And I think that's why when because I had Nedra Glover Tawwab on the show like 2.5 years ago, and her book is, has the word boundaries in it.
It's relationships, right?
Yeah. But it was on boundaries, but I think I didn't take so well because I still was looking at it like you just talked about. What do I do? And there was not a clear do. There's not a clear, these are the easily constructed boundaries. And so what this is in the evolution here is to the being. Yeah. Just what you said.
Yeah. And it just all makes so much sense, man. That's why, again, you and I have discussed this, but working with your inner children, kind of going back to those younger parts of ourselves, me who thought she had to be the savior of her family, all of these little nuggets that we get, right? In understanding, okay, how did I get here? How did I come to be this way? Like, you put the pieces together and you go, oh, well, this makes sense. If I put a stake in the ground at 5 years old, like, think about how young that is. And I'm like, I'm going to be the savior of my family. Of course I have a problem with just being and letting go, because my whole psyche is conditioned to go, do, fix, help, save. So of course now as an adult, I'm like, wait a second, something's going on. Something's not right. And that's what's so cool and very uncomfortable sometimes, when you get to that place where you're like, oh, so this is no longer serving me. I realize that. But now I'm in the space of like, okay, now how am I going to shift this? Because I like to think of it, when we think of shifting these patterns, shifting this way of looking at boundaries, think of like a whirlpool. When you're a kid and you're in the pool and you keep, you and your friends are like, let's make a whirlpool, and you're going one way. So the current gets really strong, right? And before you know it, that current's taking you and you're just floating. That's the equivalent of our beliefs, everything we're conditioned to think, right? It happens unconsciously, and we're floating about like we're in the whirlpool. And then we get to this point in our lives, like where I'm at, and it's like, oh, something's uncomfortable. I realize I have to change the current now. So now you're starting to go the opposite way. And at first it feels impossible, to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, you're holding on to the side of the pool. You're like, I got to get through this. But after a while, the current starts taking flight, and then you switch it back the other way. And the same thing happens. Now you're floating on these new beliefs. So I like to picture it that way. So it reminds me that it's going to feel like a struggle for a bit. But that first step is the awareness. And I think that's why what you guys talked about is so vital, because it's that first step of the self-awareness to start to change the trajectory and the current.
Okay. I mean, that's a huge point. I mean, that's a huge point. If we just back up into personal development, overall, that here we are, let's go back to my analogy or my experience, years back. And I have this experience to realize I'm doing, and I'm bitter. And you would think, oh gosh, great. You're aware of that. So just stop and you're good. Well, I wasn't good, because it's still all I knew how to do. And so if to not do and not jump up and take care of that, fix that, whatever. Now, okay, so maybe I'm not going forward in bitterness, but I don't know what to do. It's kind of like the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, or why we do tend to fall back into codependent or abusive circumstances that makes no sense to a lot of us. Like, why would they go back to that? It's still the comfortable. And I think that's what we miss. Again, we're on a 10,000 foot view now, just of personal development overall that you brought up. It's just such a great point. It's worth giving focus to for a minute, of finding the problem and going, oh, I see it. Stop. That's not the end of the story. Because now you're saying, okay, I'm going to go over here to a place that I am totally uncomfortable, insecure. And that's what often drives us back in, and we don't change.
Yeah. Yeah. Oof.
It's like the container. We're talking about, we've talked about, you and I talked about this. But if you got a container of religion, this is my story. I got a container. This is my religion. These are the black or whites. These are the right, wrongs, yep, do's and don'ts, whatever. And that's pretty easy. That feels good and certain. Okay. Now when I realize that's not really working, or I don't really believe that, and break apart the container, it's terrible. I don't have a container now. I'm still struggling with that when people, we talk about spirituality. Well, I believe in this. Oh, so then you accept this container? No, I don't. Well, then what's a container? And we need that. We have a show coming up. I've got one coming up with Don DePani on spirituality, and we talk about this. Mm-hmm. And he's saying you need a container. This containerless spirituality is not working out for people. You need a container. Oh, it's like a religion. Well, yeah, but I don't like the container religion. Well, so we talk about that. I don't know if we come to some big conclusion, but that's what you're bringing up here, that we know the container. I'm going to use that word of what's comfortable, secure, what our norm is. And then to say, well, it's not working. As you said, this isn't working anymore. This container isn't holding water anymore. Yeah. And get rid of it. We don't know what to do. And that's a terrifying place.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if we can start to look at it as like, when we get to that place, celebrate it, like flip the script and be like, all right, cool. Woo, I don't know what the heck is going on now, but this is the start. Now, this is the starting point of the change that's going to happen. This is the starting point of the me that I envision me to be. It makes it easier to then get through the mud, if you will. Because I think what most of us do in the world, when we get to that point, we're like, whoa, that's so scary. I'm going back to the comfort zone. And I wrote this in my book, the beauty of life resides outside our comfort zone. And that's the trick of life. It's like, but what do you mean? We're supposed to be comfortable and, life, we want it to be easy and peaceful. It's like, in certain moments, but if you want to get to the juice of life, you have to be outside that comfort zone. And it's so scary at first. It's so scary because, as you said, it's like, I don't know what happened to all who am I? What's going on?
Well, you're on it today, because you're bringing up another big point on, again, if we just look at personal development overall, we hear a lot of stuff in our industry, in this industry of, embrace change, change is great. And it's not. It's just, can we just say it's not? But what you said, to look at it, and I wrote down as you were talking, I felt like you were saying, we're looking at the payoff down the road. We're saying, okay, there's light at the end of the tunnel that I want to go towards. This isn't working. There's light out there, but in between it is a freaking tunnel. And the change, so that the big inspirational message of embrace change. Change is great. No, it's not. Mm-hmm. The hope is, and the result can be, but in it, it's not for me. I mean, it's uncomfortable. I do not have I end up saying, I've lost my footing. That's been a consistent part of my own journey in therapy, is going, okay, this isn't working. Now you're telling me something new. I can see that. And so I want to go towards that. So I'm going to step out of where I am. But now I do not have my footing. Even if I have hope out here and faith in it, I'm ungrounded. I've lost my footing. Those are the feelings that I'm playing with there. And that's just, it's not happy. It's not a happy thing. It's not for me.
The way I refer to it is I'm floating. I feel like I'm floating. I'm just floating everywhere. You say, I don't have my footing. Same thing. That's exactly what it feels like. Like I am just floating around. I am not grounded in any way, shape, or form. And that's scary. Oof, it's uncomfortable. But, it's anything. I really do believe, and I'm saying this with anyone out there who's like going through a change or the struggle. Trust me, I am with you. You are not alone. I have chills all throughout my body right now, because I know how uncomfortable and stressful it can feel. At the same time, my higher self knows, like, baby, the juice is in the journey. Like that's where all the good stuff is gonna happen. And I think of a woman in labor. I mean, it's uncomfortable. She's in agony, right? But then into the world comes this beautiful new being. So it's just a part of the human existence. But I think if our perspective, we're talking about perspective, right? Or perception about what change should be changes, then it's easier, right? So going back to boundaries, if we look at our boundaries and creating new boundaries as a positive, it helps move along that change so we don't add to the pain of it.
The juice is in the journey. That's another t-shirt we need.
Yeah, I know.
The Terri Cole juice is in the journey. Okay. You've got me, back, I mean, with boundaries, and I keep grappling with the identity part, and I'm thinking of, I say this a lot from a personal development standpoint of taking whatever the objective is and saying, I'm the kind of person who does this. I like that feeling of kind of defining and labeling myself, but I'm thinking, of course, positive. And I'm thinking here, we're talking about, I am the type, Kevin is the type. I mean, if I'm just being honest, okay, This isn't the hope. This is just the honest. I'm also a lot of negative things. I mean, I am. And so Kevin is the type of person who takes responsibility for things that aren't his responsibility, takes responsibility for others' actions, behaviors, whatnot, to feed his own identity. Okay. Well, I don't want that. And so now we're talking about the light at the end of the tunnel, and I got to step out of that, which does not feel good, because that's the identity that I know. At least I'm comfortable and have some security in that, even though it's not working. So how about if I write the goal? Kevin wants to be X, somebody who understands, boundaries and understands what's his responsibility and what's somebody else's, has compassion and whatever, write that out. Even that feels good, because it's saying, okay, I'm stepping out of this, but now I've got some kind of a label, a container that I can have hope in, as opposed to just saying, okay, well, I'm going to step out of that. And as you said, just float. And you can float forever. And maybe that's the big point. We got to what is the thing we're going for? And can we label that?
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to look at it. I love that. And it's like future casting, right? Like Renee, I am this. Even if you don't see it right now, mark that down. I am this, and all those qualities that I want to be. It's coming. It's already here. But in order to get there, I got to go through this. I have to go through this. It's the trick of life. It really is. It's like sometimes I sit there and I go, okay, so we adopted as children all of these beliefs, this conditioning. And some of it, we've done beautiful things with, right? I mean, I think most people who come on your show, we can all agree, like we've had some great successes in being the way that we were conditioned to be. But at the same time, it's also causing pain in a lot of ways. And it's like, oh, time for a shift. So it's right. It makes you step back and say, so I can't judge anything that I was, or I can't now judge myself after listening to Terri Cole and Kevin Miller. This isn't a plot to now sit and judge myself for all those years that I didn't have boundaries. No, you did the best with what you knew at the time. And I think give ourselves that grace is so important. And I'm speaking from someone who always struggles to give herself grace. So again, you are not alone if you're in that bucket of people. But it's so important that we give ourselves that grace and say, okay, cool. Now I know better. I'm going to do better. And I'm not going to do better all the time because I'm unlearning. I'm going to fall. I didn't learn how to ride a bike in one day, but I'm going to give myself grace. And you know what, Renee? Wow. Good for you. Good for you for taking that label of being the savior and taking that and running with it and doing what you believed in your heart was the positive right thing. And now you're at a new place in your life and you know better. So do better.
You're giving a masterclass in personal development here. We're going way beyond. Seriously, if you heard that and want more on that, I'm going to recommend Terri Real, different Terry, Terry, Terri Real guy. We had him on the show probably a year ago or so. His most recent book is called Us. I think he's gotten really famous lately. He's Gwyneth Paltrow's relationship therapist. And he's where I first heard that. Or he offered that, Renee, was that concept of, what you said, the things that you learned to survive as a kid. That was brilliant. Good on you. You learned how to cope, how to succeed, how to weather the whatever. But now you're not that little kid. Yeah. And that was just you just brought that up and it's so helpful. It still is. I still need to come back to that. Okay. That gut reaction to go take care of things that maybe served me well, in the past. Okay, but it's not now. It's not helping the person that I'm taking responsibility for that I shouldn't. It's not helping me because I'm bitter, whatever it is. So now stop it, but with compassion. And you and I have talked about that. It is not my natural go-to to have compassion for myself. And that's not working either. So Kevin, that's probably.
I want to say this too, because I think this is important for us to know and hear. Kudos to us for wanting to always help, right? Like let's all be having this huge desire to always help. That's pretty great, right? As human beings. So kudos to us for wanting to over deliver, over serve, even if it came from some conditioning from our childhood. Like think about how beautiful that is, being in a world where we see a lot of negative. We're not here talking about, we have a desire to hurt people. It's like, no, we have a desire to help and serve. So let that bring you some peace and some ease and allow you to celebrate yourself.
I'm not going to add anything to that. There you go, folks, right there. Renee, thank you. It's such a gift. Yeah, you're just, you're on fire today. You gave me some good stuff here, and I'm going to contact Terri and tell her about you coining that Terri Cole energy. Maybe we should get that shirt. We'll get you some shirts made for the crowd here. Hey, thanks. Always a gift. Okay, friends, again, our catalyst for this series is Terri Cole and the message in her new book, Boundary Boss, the essential guide to talk true, be seen, and finally live free. You can find her popular podcast as well, The Terri Cole Show. That's Terri. My co-host also again today, Renée Marino. Her book is Becoming a Master Communicator. You can also connect with her at reneemarino.com. Friends, thank you for tuning into Self-Helpful, where I curate the sea of new personal development materials and help you integrate wisdom into your life, because we all want to elevate our own experience and improve the way we show up for others.